this is the cutscene. It was only a few keyframes, and I changed the focal point, and that was about it. The way it started was... Oh, I didn't mean to press escape. The way it starts is in the first person example, level blueprint. I just did an event, begin play, referenced the sequence, added it to the target and just played it. Simple as that. I'll have to restart it now. This is the water. It's material is using the base textures, base albedos and base normals. I use a lerp to overlay the normals on top of each other, which like kind of merges them into the normal. And I've got these panners to make it look like the water effect. Yeah, like I typed here, if I'm honest, I just randomised them and it looked okay, so I kept it. It's just a value plugged in, nothing special. Same here, this has got a panner connected, merged together and then put into the base colour. I also changed the scaling of them as well. Both of them are 2.5, just because it was too big when I first put the texture down. As you can probably see, I've got a HUD as well. I've got a health and a drunkenness, and when you press tab it opens your inventory and stats. There's a pint of beer. There's also these HUD hints that tell you what to do. That's actually wrong, the right click. I mean, that's not how I've done it now. It's just a left click and it tells you you don't have anything to drink if you've got nothing there. If you hover over the number, it tells you a bit of information on both of them. You can't click this because it's done through pressing E rather than using the inventory. The health is here, drunk meter and the wetness, and then you can close the inventory there. I just used the bushes, the standard bush mesh, as the foliage for this area, and what I did was just change the yaw rotation and the scale. I think I changed the density as well, but I'm not sure. As for the landscape itself, it's just the standard grass texture blended with a sandstone texture. Both of them have got their normals on. When you jump in the water, it makes an explosion sound effect, but it should just be a splash one. But like it said in the top left, I couldn't find one, so I just went with an explosion. There is no post-process to it. I wish I did it now, but I never got around to it. Instead, there's post-process on the drunkenness. Talking about being in the water. When you're in the water, there's a wetness meter. It doesn't do anything, but it's just there. When you're in the water here, it checks if it's the player that's in the water, and if it is, then it fires the in water custom event, which is in the first person character here. I've also got this play sound at location, which gets the player's location and plays it there. Then there's the print text that just says it would be a splash effect. And then it's the reverse for exiting it. It just plays the not in water. If I go to the first person, which I haven't got open. This has got a lot of code in. For reference, anything with a green comment box around it is my own. It's just so I could differentiate it between built-in ones and my own. Some of them might still be white though, because I never changed the colour. Here's the in-water one. It's in dirty water, not in... well, that's outdated because originally it was going to be a dirtiness meter, but I changed my mind to just being wet. When you're in the water, it calls the custom event from this one. It calls the custom events in the first person character, which is setting a timer using a function name, which the function is player in water here, which basically every time the timer goes off while the player is in the water, it takes a random float, which is 5% or 10%, gets the wetness value, adds it together and then sets the wetness value to that. So as long as you're in the water, you will be getting wet. Yeah, it happens every 0.95 seconds. And then once you get out of the water, it stops the timer using the return handle. When you first begin playing as the player, it draws the HUD here, simple as that. Oh yeah, this is here for debug, which gets the drunkenness meter value, adds 5% and sets it, and then it calls the get drunk function, which is over here. This handles the post-processing for getting drunk. What's going on here is when the get drunk custom event is called, it goes through a sequence. Sequence 0 gets the drunk meter value, checks if it's nearly equal to 0, or if it is equal, the error tolerance is 5%. It checks the condition. If it's true, it sets the post-process settings to the defaults, so it essentially gets rid of post-processing. And then as you go down, it's in increments of 0.25%, 5, 7, 5 and 1, 100% drunk and 25% drunk. Those are where it starts to kick in, and all it's doing is changing the saturation and the focal distance, so it gets more blurry and less saturated, well, more saturated as you get more drunk. I would have liked to put more on this, but I just didn't get around to it. As for the inventory, when you press tab, it creates the inventory tab inventory widget on the screen and puts it on the viewport. It then checks the player controller, sets if the mouse cursor is on, which it would be in this situation. Then it sets the input mode to UI only. That's the full process from pressing tab. But then once you're in the menu here, clicking this closes it, and that is done from within the tab menu. This button here, when you press it, it fires the close inventory press custom event after casting to the character, which then sets off this lot, which turns off the mouse cursor, sets the input mode to game only, and then removes the widget from the screen. This function is called when you... I've lost it now, where's it gone? Oh, I'm already in it, of course. When you press this button here, it checks, it gets the, it casts to the first person character, checking if what we're doing is applied to them. It then allows me to take the inventory array, the items, and check if it is check if index 1, which is the full beer, full bit pint glass with some beer in it, checks if it is greater than or equal to 1. So as long as you've got 1 in your inventory, it will let you drink it, which fires the drink beer function in the first person character, which is this. So it presses it, and once you press it in the inventory, it fires this. It casts the first person character to check if that's what it's like doing it on, and it also allows me to take the inventory items out of it. It gets the current value for index 1 or dimension 1, whatever they're called. I don't quite remember, but it checks if it gets the current value for the amount of beer in the inventory. It then removes 1 and then inserts that new value back into the same slot. It then sets the drunkometer value. It takes the original one, adds 15% to it, and then sets it. It then fires the get drunk function, which then allows this to run, which checks what amount of percentage you're on the drunkenness, and then sets a post process based on that. In the construction script, while we're still talking about the inventory, when you first spawn as the character, when it's first made in the world, it sets this. I've made it so it sets the array elements. It sets index 0 to 0. It just essentially means that you start with nothing. Yeah, that's all of the inventory stuff, I suppose, apart from the actual functionality, which is picking up these pint glasses. It's just a placeholder for now, but when you get close it pops up with this and the text follows you. It says it's a pint glass, press E to pick up. When you pick it up, it says you picked up the item, and in your inventory you now have 1 empty pint glass. You can pick up 2, but the maths is a bit broken. I never managed to fix it. It ends up giving you a pint of beer, even though you never made it. But yeah, 2 empty pint glasses. You can then walk over to the keg. If you stand near it, says if you've got a pint glass, you can fill it up with some beer here by pressing E. Whilst you're in this radius, you can press E. It spawns a dummy pint glass and starts the particle system, which is my own sprites. I'd put a cylinder. I put a cylinder on it and change the scale and the size of the start and then the end, and randomise the size of the particles as well. But we now have pints of beer. I can do it again, which somehow sets it back down to 2. I'm obviously doing something wrong with my array, but oh well. But now that I've got those, I can click it, which removes 1 and increases the drunk meter. Clicking again, it does the same. I don't know if you can really tell, but it's starting to get blurrier. That's why I've added a plus on the key on the numpad and minus. Minus removes drunkenness by 5% and plus adds it by 5%. So if I bring it all the way up, it becomes really blurry to simulate that you're drunk. I would have added chromatic aberration and stuff, but I just couldn't figure it out because I'm not using a volume. I'm using, I'm getting a reference to, actually I think I can show it. Yeah, I'll just set them back to 0, which somehow goes to -0, but this is the actual pint glass itself. It's got the, when you enter this area, it begins the overlap. It checks if it's the player that's overlapping, and then it enables input for the for the pint glass itself, for the entire thing, and then it enables the visibility for the text to show up. And then when you leave the zone, it does the opposite. It disables the input and it toggles the visibility to off. when you press E and the input is on when you're in the area, it prints, you pick up the item, it then does a sequence where it removes all of the assets in the game, casts to the character so I can get the inventory, it gets the current value and adds 1 to it. This is for the empty pint glass, which is 0 in the array. It adds 1 to that and then inserts it into the same slot, which leaves you with whatever you had originally plus 1 because you picked one up, but it's a bit weird in that respect, but oh well. Yeah, that's everything in here. Now in the actual brewery keg, I keep doing that. We've got the viewport thing here, which has got the asset, the collision mesh, there's a text that shows up along here, there's a particle system attached to the end of the tap, and there's a sound as well, which I had made into a steam sound because it was the closest to running water I could find. So essentially, when you walk within the range of the tap, it casts to the player, checking if what's walked in is the player, which also allows me to get the inventory. It toggles the visibility for the text, which tells you how to use it. I then get the player controller and enable input for the entire object. And then the opposite is, when you leave, it checks if it's the player that just left, if it toggles visibility for the text, and disables the input for the entire asset. Once I cast the player, I got the inventory out of it. I get the value for empty pint glass. It then checks if I've got, if what it got is equal to 1 or greater than it. It means that I'm allowed to press E on it. And if I don't have enough pint glass, if I don't have an empty pint glass, it just says I don't have any. I guess I'll go find some. If I do, then it prints time to get myself a beer. In the sequence after that, the first thing to do is cast to the player, get the inventory, get the empty pint glass slot, removes 1 from it, which then inserts it, and in the same process it gets the value for it gets the slot for the beer itself, it takes that value and adds 1 to it and then inserts that to the same slot. So what this is doing is it's removing the old empty pint glass and giving you a new full one that you can actually use by clicking in the inventory, which I've already demonstrated. And then as the sequence number 2, it sets the sound for the sound in the actual asset, the viewport, which is around here. It sets the sound to a steam sound because that's the closest I had to water. It plays the sound after that, using the pour sound as the target to apply to. It toggles the visibility of the pint glass dummy, which shows up when you use the keg. It shows up for a moment, the particle system turns on, and then it turns off after this timer, which is based on an event. Here's the part where it turns on it toggles the activity for the particle system, the pouring of the drink. So once this is called, it waits 3.75 seconds, and then it triggers this custom event, which is finish pouring. Once that is triggered, it toggles visibility for the pint glass, it turns it off, it stops the sound, and it toggles the activity for the particle system, turning it off. Yeah, think that's everything. When it came to picking up the pint glasses, I originally wanted to do it on mouse over, or when on cursor over, and when it comes off as well, to be able to enable picking it up or not. But it never worked, even no matter what I did. So I ended up doing a trigger box instead, and then I used the same way of doing it for the keg itself. Yeah. I think that is everything. Oh, actually, when I press escape, no, sorry, P, it brings up a pause menu. It actually pauses the game, so if I jump in the air and press the pause menu, I'm going to leave it a moment just as a proof of concept. Then I click resume to go back in the game. I then drop back to the floor. It fully pauses the game, and it brings up the menu. There's a resume and a quit button. If I bring my mouse back, I'll show you the code for that, which is simple. There's just two buttons and a border. The border fills the screen, and when you click this button, it does exactly what it says here. When you click it, it unpauses the game, removes the widget, gets rid of the mouse cursor, and sets the input to game only. And when you click the quit button, it quits the game. So I can prove that now. I think I'm done in here. If I press the P button, click quit, it kicks me out, and then it brings me back to the editor. For the HUD, actually moving the bars up and down, I've bound the percent bar to this health value. It gets the percentage, casts to the player. As the player, it then references the health, gets the current value for it and returns it and displays it. It does that every time the health value is edited. It's the same for the drunkenness value. Here it's the same, and the health value and the drunkenness value text shows the percentage. It's exactly the same. If I go on the health value, here it gets the value, cast to the player. As the player, it gets the health, switches the float into a percentage, and then it converts the float to a text, but it shows it as a percentage on the output node, which then updates every time it's changed. There's the drunkenness one, it's exactly the same, just shows it as a percent. And the drunk meter is the same as the health one. Pretty sure that's everything to show. Obviously it's all in the, oh yeah, there's rope, but it doesn't really do much, it's just there. Oh yeah, I haven't showed those. Basically, once it's gone through it, if you try to walk outside of the bounds, you enter a trigger box, it says no, I can't. When you enter it, it shows the text, and there's a clip here. Ignore how it does that, it's because of the pivot point not being exactly on the text, it's slightly below it, so it spazzes out when you stand right underneath it. It doesn't know what to do. It's an easy fix, but I just never got around to it. But yeah, you can't walk out no matter how hard I'm trying. It's the same for every exit. There's one over there, one here, one there, and one there. The code for that is here. It checks once you enter, checks that the player's entered it, it enables the text, and then it's the opposite for when you leave. And then this is for making the text face the player. It gets the world location of the text, It then gets the world location of the, well sorry, it gets the actor locate, like the local location of the player character, minuses the values, and then gets the rotation from the X value, the difference that it gets, and then it just sets the rotation for every tick for the target, which is itself, which is just everything in it. It actually, yeah, it's everything there, I think. Or it's just the turn back text, I can't quite remember. Yeah, I think that's actually everything this time. Yeah, I think that's everything. I'm going to wrap this up. Bye, I guess.